Hello everyone. Today I'm going to talk to you about teaching. There are two ways of going about doing this. I have been teaching for around 18 years now. I can distill some points from my experience and say, okay, here are 5 things that you must do and here are 5 things that you must not do. On this occasion, I do not wish to be prescriptive in this way. This is because I believe that there is no one way to teach. All of us have our distinctive teaching styles, and these teaching styles are shaped by various factors, such as our own psychological temperaments, our own academic backgrounds, and so on. For instance, if someday you attend my lectures, you will see that the content is heavily example driven. And usually these are examples drawn from everyday life. For instance, you will see me give you examples about what you may eat at breakfast, what you could watch on Netflix, and so on. Why is that so? The simple answer, my first degree was in physics, and this is how physics is usually taught. A certain topic is introduced and you solve lots of problems on that topic. A lot of that initial training in physics survives in my teaching style. I think with pictures, with images, with metaphors. This does not mean that your style too has to be example-oriented. So without being prescriptive, I am going to be descriptive and share with you some notes about my processes of learning how to teach. Before I begin, let me highlight 2 points. Think of these 2 points as constituting something of a paradox. You could call this the paradox of pedagogy. The first point is that in one sense, nobody teaches you how to teach. If you work on an MPhil or a PhD dissertation with me, I will teach you some of the standard tricks of the trade relating to critically engaging with scholarship, footnoting, and so on. However, you will not receive a degree in teaching from the university. The second point is that in another very crucial sense, there is indeed someone who teaches you how to teach, namely your own students. Over the last 18 years, I have been learning how to teach by trying to understand why students may be struggling to understand what I am saying. Today, I'm mainly going to speak about the second point. The very first lecture I gave was sometime in July 2007. The most distinct memory I have of that lecture is that I was very nervous. What was I nervous about? Not so much about the content, which related to some themes in Indian philosophy. I think I was just nervous about the unknown. That which is unknown often makes us feel stressed. What happens when you stand in front of people you do not know and give them a lecture? What if they ask you a question that you cannot answer? How can you be sure that you are keeping them interested? What if you lose the narrative or forget the plot? So that is where I was in July 2007. You may be surprised to hear that even today I feel nervous before giving a lecture. Although today, thankfully, that nervous feeling goes away after the first 10 seconds or so. How did I gain confidence along the way? This is what I did. When I would walk into a lecture room, I would fix my attention on one person sitting in the last row. So let's say this is a gentleman with spectacles and with a black shirt. I would tell myself, this gentleman is my friend whom I have known for the last 10 years. For the first 3 minutes or so of the lecture, I would keep looking in the direction of this gentleman and tell myself that what I'm doing is not giving him a lecture, but just having a conversation with him over coffee. With the momentum which I would build up during these minutes, I would speak more naturally, more steadily, more freely. My nervousness would go away. Now, to repeat what I said in the beginning, today I am speaking not in a prescriptive but in a descriptive mode. I am not suggesting that this is a one-size-fits-all approach to teaching. However, this is what worked for me. Don't think that you are giving lectures to strangers. Think you are speaking to an old friend. Having said that, all this is about preparing yourself mentally. As you know, that in itself is not enough to give a good lecture. You have to, after all, prepare the lecture itself. Now, here is a key point. You may be profoundly learned in one discipline and yet fail to ignite a spark of inquiry in people who are listening to you. So if you want to be a good scholar who is also a good teacher, you must talk to people and not talk at people. So how does one go about meeting this challenge? One way, which is my way, is simply this: tell people a story, give them a narrative. This story, this narrative should be one that you yourself feel deeply about. It is not just an idea, although of course it is that too. It is an idea that grips you, and grips you so much that you wish to convey it to other people. To third-year undergraduate students, I give 8 lectures on the philosophical and theological dimensions of Hinduism. I have one central narrative running through these 8 lectures. Certain styles of Hindu religious cosmology, known as Vedanta, constitute the living heart of many forms of Hinduism you will encounter in the real world. That is, while Vedanta is a set of quite complex philosophical and theological systems, you will meet real-world human beings who inhabit these systems, whether in South Asia or in multiple diasporic locations. So Vedanta is not simply a set of texts of antiquarian interest. It is the lifeblood of many forms of contemporary Hinduism. In the first 5 lectures, the primary focus is on the texts, what you may call philosophy, theology, or philosophical theology. In the final 3 lectures, I discuss how these textual materials intersect with real-world sociocultural universes. At the beginning of each lecture, I remind people where we have reached on our journey. I start with a short recap of the previous lectures and tell them what content will be discussed in the present lecture. I show YouTube videos containing interviews with contemporary gurus, reflections of practitioners of styles of Hindu and Buddhist belonging, and so on. How do you write the content of a lecture and ensure that your audience will understand you? Here is one suggestion. Find a friend who is not a student of the arts and humanities. Let's say this friend is an astrophysicist or a molecular biologist who has never studied any Thomas Aquinas. Now, it should be possible for you to take this friend step by step by step by step from the basis of Christian doctrine to a relatively sophisticated understanding of the doctrine of grace in Aquinas. Suppose your friend says, "Hold on, I don't understand that." Then you make a note to yourself, "Okay, before I discuss topic B, I need to introduce topic A." Or suppose your friend says, "Earlier you said this and now you are saying something else." Then you make another note to yourself, "Okay, when I discuss topic X, I should indicate I will return to it later and qualify my remarks." In this sense, teaching is a form of self-discovery. It is only when you properly teach a topic do you learn it, even for the first time. For me, every lecture I give is an exercise in problem solving. Here I go back to what I said earlier about my teaching style being example-oriented because of my background in physics. In each lecture, I'm trying to solve one fundamental problem, so that everything I say in 50 minutes is directly or indirectly connected with this problem. I state the problem right at the beginning and provide a road map for the lecture. I try to add some human content to my teaching. This is more easily done in one-to-one supervisions than in lectures. Before I start my supervisions in Hinduism and Buddhism, the very first question I ask everyone is, why? Why do you want to study Hinduism and Buddhism? Here I am not necessarily looking for an answer such as, "I wish to carry on studying Hinduism and Buddhism into an MPhil and a PhD degree and become a scholar." Although that is of course a good answer. I am instead looking for an answer such as, "I spent my gap year in Thailand living with a Buddhist family. My mother belongs to a Hindu spiritual organization. My sister, who is Christian, recently got married to a Hindu," and so on. These are not hypothetical answers. They happen to be real answers that I have received to my questions. Then during supervisions, I modulate my examples to reflect these answers. For instance, I would give examples about Buddhist worldviews from Southeast Asia, examples about interreligious dialogue and belonging, examples about practicing mindfulness in contemporary settings, and so on. The basic point is to speak to people not simply as people who are trying to learn a subject. Although, of course, it is extremely important to maintain rigorous scholarly standards, it is equally important to speak to people as people who are trying to live their lives and trying to connect what they learn in supervisions with how they live their lives. So this is what I mean when I say that the content of supervisions can be humanized. There is a view that in Cambridge we should destabilize received wisdom. That is wisdom received by people in school. We should enable people to think outside the box. As it so happens, I partly agree and partly disagree with this view. Of course, I am all for critical thinking and revisiting received wisdom to interrogate it and, if necessary, challenge it and rewrite it. However, in my estimate, the first year, whether in lectures or in supervisions, is not the right time to start this process of transvaluation of wisdom. I always tell my first year students that what I am offering them is the least misleading way to introduce a topic. When they go on to the second year and the third year, I will speak to them with more complex idioms. Then they will see retrospectively that what I had said to them in the first year was not entirely correct. But it was not entirely incorrect either. In other words, you have to cultivate the skill of knowing precisely how much to introduce in a certain year, and equally importantly, how to introduce this content. So, as you can see, learning to teach is a human skill. There is no one right way to do this. What you need is a mentor, someone who gives you some real-world examples of how to do it. In the Middle Ages in Europe, you did not learn a trade by reading books about it. You simply apprenticed yourself to an artist or a stonemason and went through a process of hands-on learning. To use slightly philosophical language, teaching is not so much a form of knowing that as a form of knowing how. So perhaps you can attend lectures given by your MPhil or PhD supervisors and see how they teach. Simply because this is how they teach does not mean that you too must teach in just that way. Over time, you will develop your own distinctive style. Here is one final point. I see ignorance as a form of dukkha, namely epistemic suffering, and teaching as an activity that is directed towards removing or reducing suffering. If you can feel the suffering of a fellow human being who does not know, you will become patient, you will become compassionate. You will keep on trying out different ways of communicating the point to them. So what type of a teacher are you? The one who uses examples or the one who does not use examples? The only way to find out is by beginning to teach. And that is why I said earlier that ultimately only your students will teach you how to teach.